Hi everyone, we're going to get started now. So thank you all for attending our Integrating Outlook with SharePoint webinar to increase team collaboration, productivity, and compliance. We're going to cover a few different topics today, starting with some introductions. And what I want to do before we jump into all these topics is to do a little preparation for our session. So we like questions. We like lots and lots of questions. So throughout the presentation, as you think of things, please type them into the question box. At the end of the presentation, we'll go through all the questions that have been provided and we'll provide the answers to it. We will continue to go on answering questions until they're all addressed. So don't worry if you have to drop off. If you have to drop off partway through or right at the hour, the recording will be made available to you once it's been processed. So please do type in those questions. It's really important. We really want an interactive session. So today we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to do little introductions. Then we're going to talk about the use case for integrating Outlook with SharePoint, which I'm sure many of you are here for the pure reason that you actually already know of your use cases. So to that end, we want to actually talk about some of the out-of-the-box capabilities that are available with Outlook and SharePoint on their own natively. We want to show some of the pros and cons with different approaches and give you something to consider in terms of like, where do you want to go with your organization? With the final part of the presentation, we're going to actually show you our solution for Outlook to SharePoint integration called Collab Spaces. And we're going to talk a little bit about it, but more importantly, we're going to show it. And we're going to show it in some real world scenarios. So I think it's going to be a pretty exciting session. I'm really excited. I'm pretty much excited all the time anyways, but I'm really excited now. And I look forward to your questions. So to start things off, we'll do a little introduction. So I am Graham Sidley, CEO and founder of Collabware. I like to do all these webinar things because it's just fun to talk and interact with everyone, but I don't try and do all of them. So with me, I have Glen James, who also does a number of our webinars, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. My name is Glen James. I'm the Director of Customer Engagement here at Collabware, and I'm based out of our beautiful New England office in Boston. So Graham's on the West Coast in Vancouver. I'm in Boston, so we got all the time zones covered off today.
Excellent. Thanks, Glen. All right, so let's jump right into a few things. So let's start with a little bit about Collabware. So a number of you who are on this presentation have heard about Collabware in the past. Maybe you've been to some of our webinars. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview. I don't want to spend too much time on this. If you have questions about it, though, please do type them in the box. So what I'd like to really focus on with Collabware is that we're not your traditional information management software company. We started this company with the idea that we were going to solve the prevalent problems in the information management industry that had to do with users' ability to utilize the systems that were being provided for records management, for collaboration, for just regular document management. A lot of those existing systems when we formed the company were really not very designed for the end users to actually get things done. And we wanted to change that. We wanted to rethink the problem and come up with a new way that's really user-centric on how we actually can have users interacting with systems to manage their information and to perform collaborative activities. And to that end, we set out to form this concept of what we call simple, seamless, and transparent. And the idea is that we really believe everything needs to be very simple to use for all users, not just the end users, but the technical users, the analysts, anyone interacting with the software. The software needs to be ridiculously simple to use. It should also seamlessly integrate with the way people work. We shouldn't be trying to change behaviors. And this is something that a lot of traditional and legacy ECM applications or EIM applications really failed at, is they really required the users to change their behavior, to change the way they work, and often in a very burdensome way. So that's something we absolutely do not believe in. Everything should be seamless to the way people work currently, and ideally help them evolve their work practices to even be more efficient and more productive. And to that aim, we also seek to make everything completely transparent. So the idea being that if a user is going to have to know that they're partaking in a particular document management or records management process, then it's already failing, because they're not typically concerned about that. They're concerned about getting their activities done. And when you start saying, well, you need to do these other things too because it's important to the organization, they start to lose focus. So what we aim to do is make everything completely transparent. The organization has the control that they need over the information and policies and compliance that are required, but the end users don't see it. They don't necessarily even know it's there unless they look for it. And that's what we really seek with all of our software, is to ensure that we're supporting their behaviors, we're not changing them, but we're supporting the organizational's needs without affecting the users. And that's our goal. This is the world we live in. So to live in that world means that we really need to manage everything around user engagement and adoption. Are the users engaged? Are they getting things done? Are they more productive? Are they adopting the solution, or are they looking away and sidetracking, doing other solutions on the side? We really want to make sure that we're always focused on this. So this is our primary KPI. We want to make sure that user engagement and adoption is as high as humanly possible, and that's what we focus on. And we've been pretty successful. And that's, I like to toot my own horn. It just goes with the territory. But we have been pretty successful at this. We have over 100,000 daily users of our software around the world. We have 11 different industry verticals that we operate in. Our software is utilized in 3 different languages globally. And we have been increasing productivity for our customers by millions of hours, saving users tremendous amounts of time, saving analysts and records managers tremendous amounts of time, and saving the technical staff tremendous amounts of time. And we can actually look at end users specifically and say, are we able to allow them or enable them to find information faster than they could before, thereby decreasing the amount of time they spend looking for content that they need in order to execute their business processes? And the answer is most definitely a yes. We can save quite a bit of time, and this is where that productivity increase comes from. So just some fast facts before we kind of wrap out the about Collabware bit. We have 3 locations we operate in. Vancouver, Canada, that's where I'm located. That's our founding location and headquarters. We have Cambridge in the United States, which is where Glen is operating out of, and we have London, UK office as well. We have customers in a number of different verticals, but the ones that we primarily have customers in are public sector, energy, utilities, mining, health and pharmaceutical, financial, and insurance. And I'm guessing that out of our audience today, there's a vast majority of you that fall into one of these areas. We've been recognized by a few different organizations, Forrester, Gartner, KM World, for the contributions we made and the enhancements and the innovations we've brought to this space. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that as time goes, especially with what we're going to show you today. Here's just a quick sampling of some of our customers. Some names you'll recognize, some you may not, but it just goes to show a nice spectrum of organizations who are utilizing our software and our capabilities to see the benefits that we're talking about. So with that, I really want to jump into the primary purpose of this presentation, which is integrating Outlook and SharePoint. And why would you want to do it? What's the benefit or the value to you in doing this level of integration? And what I can say is that it's pretty clear there's a big benefit. So these numbers here are derived from a number of different studies that are produced by I think it was McKinsey, and there's ICD and a few others. And I just kind of quantified it into one statement so that I didn't have to have 5 or 6 different paragraphs for you. But the concept is pretty clear, that information workers are spending a tremendous amount of their time dealing with email. We all know it. I don't even need to put the fact on the screen. We all have this problem. And we know it intimately because we deal with it every day. 120, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I mean, I'm sure some of us have more, some of us have less, but the burden is still the same. You're still spending a tremendous amount of your time dealing with email. So if we're dealing with email all the time, then how are we enhancing our productivity or our collaborative abilities if it's all being done through these kind of one-line exchanges between thoughts, between people, groups of people, and it's never really truly managed or organized in any way? I'm sure that many of you have very structured Outlook inbox structures and foldering, and I started out in a very chaotic, with a very chaotic approach early in my career, where I basically everything was in my inbox and I would just manage everything there. Hey, some of you are probably still doing that. If you're comfortable with it, that's fantastic. I quickly got to the point of realizing my inbox was kind of my to-dos. I really need my inbox to be as manageable as possible, because these are the things I'm working on right now. And everything else I'm going to refer to later, I'm going to file into some structure. Well, what's that structure? Everybody's got their own structure because we all manage our own inboxes. So what we started to think about is that, well, really, when it comes down to it, a vast majority of that email that I'm dealing with is being tied to a project, a case, something I'm working on for a start and end period, that usually involves obviously more than myself, because I don't email just myself, although I do occasionally do that. So when we look at the scope of what people are actually working on, and we think about it in terms of an ongoing project or case, well, that inherently means there's collaboration. So that means that by default, we're saying that when we're dealing with all these emails, a majority of it is collaboration. It's not just I send you something and that's a statement and we're done. That's never how it works. There's always some form of collaboration, and it's tied to something that we're working on together. So the challenge that we face is that that is ridiculously chaotic, inefficient, and wasteful of our time. I can tell you I must spend at least an hour of my day just dealing with responding to emails that didn't really need a response, should have been done through another forum, but the only point of collaboration that is there is email, because typically with external parties, that's all we've got to work together with. And I spent a fair amount of time doing this. I'm sure all of us do, where you're sending that email and for example, maybe you're sending an attachment to an external party to review, and you find out that someone else on your team actually already sent that attachment to them, or a different version to it, but didn't copy you on that email, so you didn't know, so you just wasted your time doing the same thing. And there's, stories go on and on and on. I'm sure many of you have stories, and hey, if you got some you want to share, please type them in. I'll be happy to bring them up at the end. I love these great stories because it's a world that we've just kind of come to accept, that this is just how things are done. And I don't believe that that's the way things should be done. I believe we need something that's different. I believe we need something that's going to integrate that email world with our collaborative world and with our document management world, so that we can take those chaotic, inefficient, wasteful experiences and bring them to a location, and let's use SharePoint as an example, where we're already collaborating in a much more efficient way. So when we're sharing information, we're not sharing it through multiple different attachments with different groups of people. We're sharing it in SharePoint and working on that single thing together. So the world of integration between these two things is where we're going to see the enhancement in productivity and the reduction in that waste. And that's why we're here today, is to talk about how do we do this? What ways can we make that happen so that we can all see the benefit? So let's talk a little bit about the native capabilities that SharePoint offers. I'd like to start with the first one, which many of you may have seen if you use SharePoint, which is the concept of connect to Outlook. And the idea here is I can go to my SharePoint location and I can open up the ribbon and I can simply say connect to Outlook. Now it's going to give me a dialog. I don't have screenshots for all that, but it's going to give me a little dialog saying, kind of how do you want to connect? Do you want to sync up your documents? And yeah, sure, you use the options that work for you. And then what happens is in Outlook, I then see my SharePoint location. So you can see in the second screenshot there's some SharePoint lists. We've got a project site in Office 365, and we basically have these documents that are out there that are from SharePoint that I'm now accessing in Outlook. So this is a great first step. It's really easy to do. Anybody practically can do it, as long as you have at least the most bare minimal level of permissions to that SharePoint location. And you can set up your Outlook to have access to SharePoint. So it sounds really like it's good. I actually think it's a great starting point. But there are some pros and cons, right? So the pros are it's very user driven. The user can just simply go and choose to do this. That's fantastic. That's what you want. You're not changing their behavior. You're not focusing on something else. They're making a choice that this is what they want to do, and you're supporting it. Fantastic. it works with all sorts of content in SharePoint. So you can do your tasks, you can do libraries and calendars, discussion boards, and I really particularly like the calendar one because I know, for example, here at Collab we maintain a calendar of events for different marketing events and internal events and all this wonderful stuff. And I have that available in my Outlook at all times because I always want to know when I'm scheduling things, is there something else going on with other people or other projects that I'm unaware of? So great feature for being able to pull that content in. And again, it's just a click of a button on a ribbon, which is great. It does synchronization for offline file viewing. Now, I gotta say, it does do it, but I wouldn't say it does it well. So that's something to be very careful of. I've had a number of issues with this where it doesn't quite work the way you would think it would work. Things will not synchronize on update when you think they should have synchronized. So it's a little bit, I wouldn't rely on it for this, but it certainly can do it. So that all sounds wonderful, but there are some pretty significant cons. Well, let's start with the first and most important one, which is you can view the content in SharePoint, but you can't add content to SharePoint. That's a pretty big con. The idea here is I can see the documents, I could use them in attachments and open them and stuff, that's cool. But what about adding content? What about collaborating? I can't do any of that. That's not what the purpose of the Connect Outlook is. The Connect Outlook is there to show you SharePoint content in Outlook. But it's pretty good first step, easy to do. Highly encourage everyone at least give it a shot, see if you like it. All right, so there's another method. This is the one that in the early days of SharePoint I had to rely on quite heavily because I didn't have the fancy tools we're going to show you later. But save as email. So now I want to get an email into SharePoint because this email is important to my project. I want to get this email in so that everyone can see it. I mean, I could forward it to everyone. I mean, but then we're right back to square one, right? Which is now I'm forwarding out this email. Everyone's got a different copy. Someone else is going to forward it to someone else, and on we go. Really, what I want to do is I want to put it on this site, and I want to be able to take advantage of some SharePoint capabilities. I want to be able to, add metadata, and I want to be able to run workflows, and I want to be able to do records management on this thing. Well, in order to do that, I need to put it in SharePoint. So I can go to the file. We all know this experience, right? Go File, click Save As, and it's going to ask me where do you want to save it. By default, it's going to show you different locations, your desktop, maybe your OneDrive. But if you want it to go in SharePoint, you're going to have to put a SharePoint URL in the address bar. Now, it will remember, as Windows Explorer does, all of your recent locations. So if it's a location you've been to recently, you can just pull down the address bar and pick the location. SharePoint, Outlook and all Office products will track your recent SharePoint locations as well. So when you go into Save As, you click the SharePoint option, it'll show you all your recent SharePoint locations up to a point. It only shows you a certain number, and then after that, you got to enter the address again. So it's a little bit manual, a little bit cumbersome, but it will help you get your emails into SharePoint. So again, pros and cons. Pros, number one, again, it's user-driven. They're making a choice. You're not changing their behavior. In fact, this whole concept of save as is something everybody is familiar with. You don't have to worry about people not understanding it. It'll work really well for all your recent locations as well. So as I mentioned, it's not you have to enter the address bar all the time. You're only going to have to do it when it's not one of your recent locations. Now, some cons is it does take a number of steps, right? Users aren't going to do this for the emails that are kind of relatively important or relatively good. They're going to only do it for the most important stuff, which isn't bad, but that means that you're missing a whole bunch of stuff that's also still useful. Here's the big kicker though. You can't enter metadata, right? So you're going to save the document into SharePoint. You're going to go File, Save As, email goes in with the attachment, and then you have to go open the web browser, go to that location in SharePoint, and then edit it again to provide metadata. Okay, that is way too many steps. That is now users aren't going to take advantage of it. It's too much work. So these are some cons, but it does provide you kind of that basic way of getting emails into SharePoint. So another option we have here is the library email address. Okay, so this is where for your library, so let's say you've got one of these legal matter, capital project you're working on, some IT project, some records management project, whatever it is, you can create an address for your SharePoint library. And then you can simply use that address in emails, and it'll take that email and it will send it to that library. So this can be a pretty easy way to organize and control the flow of email related to a case. So this is where we start to touch on things that are pretty case savvy. So this is an option here, and what it'll allow you to do is basically send that email in. Now, the downside is, or let's talk about the pros first. Any user can participate, right? Even if you're not really a member of the site, you can send it to that address and it'll go to the site. It's simple. Everyone understands carbon copies. Some cons though, doesn't work in SharePoint Online. You have to know the email addresses, and that's not that easy. Like, you got to really track all that stuff. The attachments will be separated from the emails in every case. They'll actually be split out, so you'll have both items land separately, which is in some cases good and in some cases not. You have to still go to SharePoint to set the metadata. It's not going to let you do that. You have to still open the browser, edit the items, set the metadata. And the email attributes aren't going to be captured as metadata. So the to, the from, all that wonderful stuff, then none of that's going to get captured. So it's got a lot of cons, but it can be one of those ways to just kind of provide people a way of dumping stuff into your project. One of the bigger downsides that actually isn't listed here is it does take quite a bit of setup from the IT side to make that work. So that's also can be quite a con. So the last one I want to talk about for native capabilities is the site mailbox. So with the site mailbox, and this is a new feature with SharePoint Online in 2013, it's the idea that I can have a mailbox for my team site. And people can email, as we did with the last example. You can put in the address and just simply email it, or you can, for the first time now, do drag and drop in Outlook. So that's actually quite beneficial. So a couple screenshots you'll see here from the SharePoint side on the left. You'll see a mailbox option. When you click on it, it will open up your mailbox app. Now, an important point to note is this is taking you out of SharePoint context. It's basically taking you to an Outlook web access view that's showing you a mailbox. So it's an actual mailbox in Exchange. Now, that can be pretty jarring for people. It's not part of the experience that you're expecting when you're in SharePoint. So it does change behavior a bit. Now, the plus side is, though, from Outlook, as you can see in the third screenshot, I can simply add that location to my Outlook, and then I can do my drag and drop and all that wonderful stuff to that location. I can view the items, I can drag and drop. It's actually pretty cool when you think about it, but it has some pretty big cons. So pros, again, any user can participate. Super easy for everyone to be integrated. The drag and drop is key, and you can do the attachments and stuff really easy as well. You can drag to or from, right? So it's really simple. Cons though, it's only going to show up in Outlook for site owners. That means every user who wants to use this has to be a site owner. That's a pretty dangerous proposition if you're doing a structured collaborative rollout of SharePoint. You're not going to make everyone site owners. That's dangerous. The interesting thing I find is it's a very limited view of the content. So the metadata and all that stuff, you don't really get to see any of that. And the email itself isn't actually in SharePoint. So you still don't have the ability to have that email participate in your SharePoint processes, workflow, records management, metadata, search, any of that. It's not going to be there because it's actually still in Exchange. So it looks like it's all integrated, but it's actually still in two different spots. So it's something to be very, very clear on, is you're not going to be having these emails part of your SharePoint experience. They're only accessible in the mailbox. All right, so we're here to talk about all the possibility of integrating Outlook with SharePoint. Well, conveniently enough, Collabware has developed a new product that allows a much better experience adhering to the simple, seamless, and transparent approach for integrating these two worlds. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but then Glen is going to take you through a deep dive demo and show you how it all works. So let's talk about what it is. So our Collab Space product is a team chat, collaboration, and file sharing service that has SharePoint integration. So it does a lot of things. It's not just about SharePoint, and you're going to see that. It's about that experience of collaborating and making it more simple, seamless, and transparent. It really does help you collaborate more effectively, and the key thing is you never have to leave Outlook. And many of us, I know I'm one of them, I live in Outlook all day long. I'm in Outlook. I don't want to have to go switching to other apps, like go to the SharePoint web browser or other things. I don't want to switch to instant messaging software. I want to do everything right here. Show me how to just simply work in my primary point of communication. One of the really great side effects of this is it will replace that email conversation thread that takes place, and it'll put real-time chat in its place. And I think that this is one of the most powerful aspects of Collab Spaces, that you're not just managing emails, you're reducing emails. You're taking emails and bringing it down to the things that are important, and all that back and forth that takes place between you and that thread of people on that email chain can all be done in real time and not using email, so that you're not crowding up inboxes and making mistakes and having inaccurate information. It'll allow users to find and file content in SharePoint in the most simple, seamless, and transparent manner possible. Drag, drop, fill out metadata, done. You don't need metadata, no problem. You need check-in, check-out, no problem. All of that can happen right from Outlook. Nobody has to leave. The experience is all done there. So just a quick little set of key features. You're going to see it also. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's a lot of really powerful stuff taking place around drag and drop and search and sorting, filtering, and all sorts of other file sharing type functionality. You're going to see a bunch of this today. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Glen, and he's going to take you on a tour. Take it away, Glen.
Thanks, Graham. Just give me a second to just set up here. There we go. All right, thank you. So what you're seeing here, this is just my Outlook environment, and what we're looking at is our Collab Space product, or as an add-in. It installs as an add-in to Outlook over on the right-hand side. And so the Collab Space, just a little bit of the lay of land before we get into it. We've got an area for a little tab for spaces. This is what we're going to talk about first. And there's a tab for SharePoint integration. We've got the SharePoint integration over there as well. This particular panel, you don't have to have it open all the time. You can resize it. It's got all the usual kinds of things. You can close it off. You can reopen it to make it available. So lots of different options around that. I guess the best way, from here, we're able to create new spaces, to invite people to spaces, to drag and drop items into that space. But the really best way to show that is just go straight into an example. So, in fact, Graham sent me an email this morning, and he was asking for some stuff about some trade show stuff. So, hey, that's pretty good. Well, you know what? There's going to be some conversation I want to have about this, and really, I don't want to have to send emails back and forth, and clutter up my inbox. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a space for this. And this space, that's what it's called, Graham's involved, and I'm just going to take a look at that. Yes, I do have some thoughts. Let me get back to you. Right? When do you need them, maybe? And so I'll just sort of save that and send that off. And what that's done is it's actually taken the email itself and it's provided some context. So this chat is in context of that email. So I've sort of responded back to Graham on that, and Graham's going to do some chatting. He's going to have some notification that there's some sort of message there, and he's going to just respond back, and we can see there. Now we've got a little visual clue that there's been an update, so we can just access that directly, and he's got some response. I'm going to have some additional information I want to add in, so I'm just maybe going to drop in a file there. Here's a sample. Here's a sample presentation, and if I wanted to, I could actually add more people to this space. So right now it's just Graham and I, but I can invite more people. And I'm not limited by just the people in my domain. If I work on working with a team, a couple of other vendors, working with a customer or whatnot, then I can include those people in that space as well with a simple invitation, and they would have access to this. So there's the sample presentation. Away you go. And within this space, I can see, again, my chat, the dialogue, the individuals who are members of that space, and all the documents or anything that have been included in that. So all that's really handy and close by. When I have this space, let's see, let's Graham responded. See, it looks great. So now what I've got is just a quick dialogue about things. I don't have to clutter my inbox with 4 or 5 different one-liners about what's going on. I can deal with that all in my Collab space. Now, the other really key difference to this, you might think, oh well, I can just use Link or my other enterprise chat to do that. But those are somewhat independent. I've got to jump out back and forth for that. If I have this, this space is now associated, related in context to this email. If I actually take that email and I just drag that into my another folder, my demo emails, for example. So if I come up and I see that that particular original email, what I can do is we keep track of that, and we can just open up the related space. So we've got the context. And if I open up that space, now I have all that available to me right in my Collab Space panel. And the other great thing is that Graham can do this too. He can have, since he was the original sender of the email, he could actually move that, and maybe he moves it around within his Outlook, whatever. He can just access that email in his inbox, wherever, just click the open, and this entire Collab Space chat will show up and be available. So it's pretty cool. Let's just to summarize, what does that look like? Well, again, we've had the ability to have the dialogue managed there. We've got the members who are associated with that, and I can invite others outside of my domain. I've got all the documents that are included in that space. Right? It provides for quick and simple responses in a dialogue-like format, and really it reduces all the bloat and clutter from my inbox. So instead of 4 or 5 emails, right, I'm just dealing with one email and the related dialogue. And again, the beauty, as Graham said, just like Graham, he works all the time in Outlook. I do too. I'm like 80–90% in this world. So this allows me to stay within there and not have to jump back and forth between different apps. So I like it quite a lot. That's the one beauty of working at Collabware, as well as all these products we use ourselves as well. So it's been very productive for me since we've had Collab Space. So let's now talk a little bit about transition over to the SharePoint world. So that's great about Spaces, but a lot of the focus today is really about SharePoint Outlook. How do I deal with content that's in SharePoint? How do I get access to it from Outlook? How do I get emails and attachments into my SharePoint environment? So what we have here is within the SharePoint tab of Collab Space. If we want to access a SharePoint site, all we do is we just simply copy and paste their URL into this area, and then we'll be able to pop up and access the site itself. So I've got different, and we keep track of all your recent ones into, and so for example, I've got my Office 365 site, so I can just click on that, and here's my documents in that SharePoint Online environment, right? I can see if I hover, I've just got the URL there. You can see it's in SharePoint Online. But as Graham mentioned earlier on, a lot of people work within the context of a case or a project, and you want to be able to, of all the projects that are open, you might be working on 2 or 3 of those at one time. So in this example, I've favorited the 3 that I've been working on. So there's the NCO, ACM, and QW. These are just examples. In these examples, they're legal matters, but there could be projects, other kinds of case kind of information that you might want to have and relate to that. So what you are able to do is actually pop those up as favorites. So let's do that and show you how easy that is. So I'm just going to bring up my meetings. I'm working on some board meetings, and I'm in there quite frequently, so I want to pop that up. So all I need to do is just click the star to say I want that to be a favorite, and I can then just update this what I need to. So this is board meetings, and I'll just add that. A little favorite thing is lined up, and we can see that it's now popped up to the top. I can do things, I can change the name, I can remove it from my favorites. So over time, as I work on different projects, I can just add the URLs, put those to my favorite list, and that's nice and handy and close by to do what I want to do. So within the libraries, we talked about Office 365 access, all the on-prem access. And let's take a look at one of the libraries. Let's go into, I'm working with Acme and Coyote right now, so we just click on those, and we actually have access to their libraries. Let's take a look at some of the documents, and they're in exposing documents within Outlook. This panel is interesting. Just the list of documents is not that useful sometimes, so you can obviously, you can bring that out and expand that as well to see this is your SharePoint default view of that library. You can see all the various metadata associated with those here as well. So we really provide a nice convenient way to be able to show that information. Right? Each individual document, we can also bring up of either an individual or in multiple documents. Let's bring up multiples in this case. If we want to update some metadata on those, let's just say that I've been working on these in draft status and maybe I need to change the status or a date on them. So I can select those and I can bring up their metadata information within Outlook. That was one of the things when Graham talked about all those different examples of out of the box. It's really difficult to do out of the box stuff and also be able to provide metadata. So this is something that Collab Spaces provides with our SharePoint integration quite nicely. So if I wanted to change the status on this to something else, let's just say I wanted to change it just back to a work in progress status, I can just make that update. And the beauty with this is that if I've got multiple documents selected, I can just click the little the link icon. And what that's going to do is that's going to actually propagate that update through all the documents I've selected. So bulk metadata updates is really an important thing for a lot of customers. And this is an easy way to be able to select multiple documents in the library, make the one change, and then have that one value propagate throughout all the items that were selected. So we'll just save that. All right. And if we close that, and if we go look at our expanded list again, then we can actually see that that update's happened and it's all been changed back from review to work in progress. So pretty cool. I can also take these things, if I want to work on them, I can just easily just double click on those. It's going to open up Word for me. And I should just point out this environment is working off of my laptop, and so the entire SharePoint laptop, so it's a little bit sluggish sometimes. Oh, there we go. So update again. And I can just save that. You don't have to worry about where it is or anything. CLM and Office take care of all that for us. So it's just saved. I can just close that off. And my updates happened in the background. Again, if I wanted to do full checkouts and things like that, I can just open up a metadata screen. I can check it out. If I've got access rights, I can delete it. Basically, anything that you can do within SharePoint on that document, you can do right within your Outlook world. So you don't have to keep bouncing around back and forth. So that's great that it's in Outlook, but often I need to, or it's great that we have some content exposed or SharePoint library exposed, but often how do I get that information into an email I need to send to somebody or do a link? I don't necessarily want to send a copy, maybe I want to send a link. I don't want to send copies all over the place. So how do I do that? Well, very simple. I could either just take one of these documents and just drag and drop that into an email I'm preparing. There we go. Right? Or what I can do is I can actually take a link and I can just drop that link in there as well. So it's just simple drag and drop to be able to get what you need to do. So again, all pretty simple, pretty seamless, pretty transparent. Still working with documents, one of the other key things is I often get documents in emails as attachments. When we're working on bids or things like that, I need to get them into our various pursuit libraries and things. So, with Collab Spaces, it's really easy. I can just take a particular attachment, and in this case, I'm just going to just drag and drop that right into my library here. Oh, of course, it already exists, doesn't it? Well, some duplicate detection takes care of things there, whether I want to overwrite it or not. But let's take this one, an affidavit. Yeah, and we'll drop that in. And again, what it's going to do, which is different than the out-of-the-box stuff, is it's going to prompt for my metadata. I can change the content type that I want. I can provide different values here. If I've got other kinds of things that are available, in this case, I'll talk a little bit about these other values later, but any metadata that gets populated automatically can be there. And really, what did I do there? I just dragged and dropped. I didn't provide any other information, and I just closed that off. And now my affidavit, my attachment is in my SharePoint library, all set to go. So it's one thing about working with content, but what about emails? What do we do with emails? Like we want to be able to receive a bunch. I'm working as either a project manager or a case manager of some sort. I want to get things that are records that I need to share with people out of my inbox. I need to get them into my SharePoint library where things can be searched and sorted and grouped and managed and shared with my team. So how does all that happen? Well, let me just, I have to just do just one brief little check here. Just one, bear with me just for 1 second. Oh, that'll be fine. Okay. So here I've got various emails from my inbox, and I just happen to have, for this particular case, Acme and Coyote, I've got 2 libraries set up, one for documents, one for correspondence. You don't have to do that. You can have it all in one library with different document types or whatnot, but or content types. But I've got 2 set up. So let's just go in our correspondence library here, and there's various things that are available for us. So we can see that we've got the little lock icon on those as well. So if you have our compliance edition in SharePoint, our CLM compliance edition, then we can do automatic declaration of emails as records as well. So we'll show you that in a sec. So I've got several emails I'm working with, and there's different ways I can get these into my SharePoint library. The normal sort of default is I can actually select multiples, 1 or more, and I can just drag and drop them in, and that's going to copy those over to the SharePoint environment. But I can also just move them. If I don't want to have them remain in my Outlook environment, I can just do a move for those as well. So that will actually just remove them from my inbox and put them right into SharePoint. But I've got several things that I want to add in, so I'm just going to select those multiples, and I'm just going to drag and drop those into my SharePoint environment. And here, just like we did with updating the metadata for those documents, we are presented with the metadata screens, and we can choose what we want to do here. In fact, I'm not going to add anything in this particular case. There's no values I need to add. We see that values like the matter number and matter name and things, if you have the CLM Compliance Edition running in SharePoint, we have a case management tool that we call aggregates that allows you to define metadata at a case level, at a project level, and it will actually push that out to any content that's related or been aggregated to that project or case. So in this situation, this legal matter, has an aggregate, and as a result, any content I want to put in that, we're going to automatically populate all that metadata. So here, I've automatically populated all that stuff, and I really don't need to do anything. So let me just close that off. We see that on the right-hand side, those emails have been added to our library. And in fact, if I actually go to my SharePoint library, let me just bring that up for you for a second. So if we actually go to the SharePoint library, just to refresh that a little bit, then what we see is these are the 3 emails that I just popped in. So the NUCO action, Coyote no-go, Roadrunner affidavit, so all those things are added in. And if you notice, we've got the little lock badge on there right away, which means that, again, if you've got the CloudWare Compliance Edition, we'll actually recognize that and make that a record right away. We'll declare it a record, so it's been made immutable. You can't do anything with it. And if we look at its life cycle details behind the scenes, right, its life cycle workflow, we can see that we've recognized that it's been an email, and our rules are that if it's an email added in, we want to preserve it right away, which we have declared it. And this is just an example of event-based disposition on that email. You aren't restricted to just time-based disposition. If you have the Compliance Edition, this is going to wait until the legal matter reaches its trigger to start disposition before anything happens to it. So basically, a single drag and drop into my SharePoint library, and that email has automatically become a record and automatically been put under the proper compliance control for that particular item. You don't have to have the compliance piece. If you don't, that means we don't have the declaration piece or the life cycle part of it, but if you do, then there's a big advantage to that. The other thing that you're going to see, then again, out of the box solutions don't do this, is we have the email header data that will actually come through into SharePoint. And why is that important? Well, I know for me, I was quite hesitant to be putting emails into SharePoint, about a year ago, because I put it in and it just looks like a regular document. And really, what do I really like about my inbox? I can sort it by, things that, when did I get things from, who sent them to me, what dates were they around. I like that sorting and finding ability within my inbox. Well, now that we have email header data out in SharePoint, you can craft, and all this stuff is available to SharePoint Search. You can craft searches or even use our global content query and information query to really pull related emails together. And it's not exactly like your inbox, but basically you could have your own version of your inbox within your SharePoint site. So overall, I think it's been really, really useful for me for all of the sales pursuits that we've been working on. So just to summarize, let's go back to our Outlook here. We really looked at a simple, seamless, and transparent solution. We were just doing drag and drops to do what we needed to do. There was nothing else that an end user needed to worry about around how to use it. It's very intuitive. We saved time and money because we didn't have to bring up separate applications. We didn't have to navigate SharePoint to find what we needed to. We got our favorites all set up nice and handy for us right there, right? And ultimately, this is going to improve the way that you work in Outlook. It allows you to stay in Outlook and manage your emails in a compliant way within your organization and really get rid of that bulk and bloat that you have in your inbox at the moment. So with that, I think I'm going to just sort of switch back to Graham now and just for some final thoughts and if there's anything else he wants me to take a look at. Graham, why don't you take it away? Let me just pop up the deck here.
Perfect. Well, great demo, Glenn. Thanks a bunch. We have a ton of questions. Wow. We got a lot of really good ones, and it's going to take some time to get through them. But I'm committed. If you're committed, we'll get through all these questions. So let's start at the top because my scroll bar is getting smaller and smaller. So the first question that came in early on, great question. Does your product require Outlook 2013? Absolutely not. It works with Outlook 2010, 2013, and 2016. We just show everything in 2013 because that's our default demonstration environment. We have another question, which is if you invite someone to a space that is not in your domain, what do they need to have installed on their end to be a part of it? Excellent question. Very excellent question, because we're seeing everything in Outlook right now. So they could have the Outlook add-in installed on their side. In fact, when you invite someone who's external to your domain, they will get an invite saying, hey, in this case, person X is trying to collaborate with you in Collab Space. Would you like to participate? And in that case, they would be able to install the Outlook add-in themselves if they would like. However, we also provide web and mobile interfaces as well. So they might say, well, I don't really want to do this Outlook thing, but I'll click the link to go to the collabspace.com and I'll sign in there and all the same functionalities available, except for the SharePoint integration. That's very, very difficult to do without poking holes in firewalls. But they'd be able to do Collab Spaces from the web and mobile clients. All right, next question. How do you know when an email has been linked to a Collab Space chat? You may have set up the chat 3 or 4 weeks ago, a couple of months, and may not remember. Great question as well. In fact, there's an update coming shortly that's going to start revealing that capability, where when you click on an email, there's 2 things you have right now. One, you have that little open button in the bottom right, which will light up if there's an actual chat available for that particular email. However, there's another update coming where you'll actually see on the top bar of the email, you'll see all the related locations in SharePoint where that email might have been stored or copied, and you'll see any spaces as well in the future with that same functionality. So we're really trying to bring lots of different ways to make sure that people can get to what they need to get to very quickly. All right, what is the data store for the Spaces content, specifically the dialogue and conversations? Excellent question. I knew this was going to come up, and I suspect it's probably in here 4 or 5 times. The data store for the Spaces conversations is a cloud service. Now, currently, we run a US cloud data center. We are opening one in Canada and one in the UK as well, and that'll be very, very soon. I can't give definitive timelines, but it will be soon. So you'll be able to choose the data center for jurisdictionality that you want to use. So if you're a Canadian customer who cannot have data in the US, you will be able to make that choice that says, I want all my data to stay in Canada. But it will be in a cloud service. It isn't stored on-prem because you are integrating external parties in some cases, and all of that is performed through the collabspace.com cloud service. but you will have jurisdictional control for your data. That is something we are absolutely 100% committed to. In fact, it's our next major update that's taking place. We'll be rolling out some of that capability. So it's really important to us, and it's important for the long-term vision of what we have for Collab Space. So the next question was basically the same. So I knew I was going to get it multiple times. Where's the space saved? I think we've covered that now. Next question, where are the dialogue and files saved when you create Collab Space in Outlook? I believe that is the same question. Files would be the same. They would be stored up in the cloud service and made available to participants of that space. Next is, do you hook into Link and Skype for Business? You know, it's interesting. We actually looked at doing this early on, but we found that there's a vast majority of our existing customers, as well as the market in general, doesn't actually use Skype for Business. So while we could hook into it, and certainly may at some point in the future, at this point in time, we're actually really providing a service on top of it, because we're not trying to replace it. We're providing something that's really specialized around collaboration, specifically in context of emails and SharePoint and other things. But we don't directly hook into it and may at some point in the future. Will you address eDiscover holds as it pertains to Collab Space and SharePoint? Absolutely. So let's talk about SharePoint first, because that's where our Collabware CLM product comes in. It manages things for discovery and holds and all sorts of automation and powerful capabilities around compliance. So that piece, as soon as something lands in SharePoint, it would be completely and utterly managed by Collabware CLM. So when we talk about spaces, at this point in time, we don't offer that exact same functionality, but it will be coming in the future. So you will be able to do full legal hold and full discovery on all the content for your organization that is contained in Spaces, Conversations, and external collaboration. So we are, at our heart, a collaboration, productivity, and compliance company. So we won't sacrifice any one of those pieces in any equation. So Collab Spaces is no exception to that rule. Over this, throughout this year and just basically forever, you will constantly see new capabilities around those three areas for all of our products. How are permissions managed in Spaces? If we've effectively moved the conversation out of email and into dialogue spaces, does this mean that anyone on the team who has been granted permission will be able to see the conversation? Yes, effectively, if you add someone to your space, then you're granting them permission to see that information. So by making the choice to add them, you are allowing them to see the information. So that's effectively how you're managing the permissions. You choose, it's really no different than if you're using some other cloud service where you choose to share your content, you're choosing to share your space, and when you do that, you're granting them permission. Another question, this is about the SharePoint integration. Is it possible to create views instead of showing all items? Yes, absolutely. Right now it shows the default view of your library in that location. So whatever your default view is configured to look like and do, that's what you'll see. There will be updates in the future that will allow you to select from other views that you may have configured for that library as well. But right now it's just the default, and the selections will be coming in the future. Does your product integrate with FileNet to move content from Outlook and or SharePoint into FileNet? No, there's no plans at this point to be integrating directly with FileNet. Our primary repository that we work with is SharePoint, so we're pretty firmly committed and structured to focus on that. But I can say that without getting into too much details, there will be some integration with external systems coming in the near future, not specifically with FileNet, although if that was something that was of high demand, the capabilities that'll be coming in the future could look at introducing FileNet connectivity as well. Can you sort and filter the expanded document default view? Not exactly at this point in time. It's based on your view's settings. So if your view has things sorted a certain way, then that's how you're seeing it. Additional sorting and filtering and things will be coming in the future, but not at this exact moment. It's taking your view settings from SharePoint and applying them to that view. Can you make sending a link the default option? That's an interesting question. Not currently, but that's a great idea, and I will certainly pass that on to the team, that having a personalized setting and allowing you to choose whether links or attachments are your default. Great idea. We'll log that down, and I think thank you for the contribution. Can you start a Collab Space chat about a document already in SharePoint? Oh, wow, I love how you're getting ahead of us on this. This is something we're working on. So yes, it's coming. You will be able to, in the near future, create spaces from documents in SharePoint. And we have a whole bunch of really great ideas and capabilities that we're embedding into that so that we're really unifying those worlds. So right now, spaces are really about conversations in email. SharePoint is about documents in email, and over this next little while, you're going to see all that kind of come together as a unit so that collaboration takes place wherever it needs to take place. All right, next question. Do you have to create multiple Collab spaces in Outlook if you work with multiple different libraries in SharePoint? You don't have to. You can have one space that encompasses a whole bunch of things. And when it comes to SharePoint integration, you can add each library individually if you want, or you can just add the site and then just drill down into the library. It's really up to your navigation patterns and habits as to how you want to go about actually drilling into your SharePoint information. But it's completely flexible. You can go, one site, individual folders, libraries, whatever you want. You can favorite and mark whatever your core locations are and just work with those. All right, there is no indication that an email with an attachment there's no indication that an email with an attachment has an attachment once copied over to SharePoint. How do you get around this? That's a really great question. In fact, typically there is. I think it might be a little deceiving because once things are made a record, the icon overlay for the paperclip turns into a lock. I believe, and I might need to be corrected on this, but I believe that if the item is not a record, you would see a paperclip icon on top of the email showing that it has an attachment. I'm not entirely sure. I believe, and there's also an attribute I believe that you can show that would indicate that an item has an attachment as well. That can be a metadata column. So there are ways to do it, but we didn't have it necessarily configured that way for this demonstration. All right, and then I have another question around where are the spaces and chats stored in cloud and on-prem? So we got that one. Can you create a favorite list to a document set? That's a great question. I'm actually not sure. I don't know that I've done it. I believe you can. Now that I think about it, I believe I've done that myself. I believe you can because document sets are effectively folders. I may be corrected on that, but I believe you can. Can you archive space conversations as a record, search for them, etc., just like a file? This is something that's coming. We actually had it in our very earliest edition, but we didn't feel that the experience was as good as it should have been. So it's going to be refined, and we're going to produce something that is a much better experience in an upcoming release that'll allow you to then take that conversation and archive it. So the original way was basically to take the conversation, the attachments, and turn them into an email, which you would then archive. It worked okay. The experience wasn't as simple, seamless, and transparent as we kind of hold ourselves to as a standard. So there'll be a little bit more refinement before we release it, but absolutely that will be a capability set you'll see. And search, of course, will be coming across all things very shortly as well. Did not notice the copy URL was used with linking documents. The full path was added. Is this possible? You can use the copy URL, absolutely. In terms of I believe what you're referring to is the unique ID linking that Collabware CLM provides to link to a document not by its path but by its ID. I believe you can. I'm not entirely sure if the copy URL does that. If it doesn't, I believe it will be doing it shortly, but I'm not entirely sure what the current state of the copy URL option is when you're using the Collabware CLM unique ID linking. Another question is, how is the product licensed? It's licensed per user on an annual subscription basis. So ultimately, based on the volume of users you're licensing, there's a price point per user. And the list price starts out quite minimal, and I'd be happy to get into those discussions. Please reach out to me at sales@collabware.com. Myself or someone else on the team will be able to work with you and talk about those prices. But let's just say, you could choose to have Collab Space or you could choose to have a latte. So it's really a choice that you get to make. This has similarities to Office 365 groups. How do you compare the two? Oh, that's a great question. It does certainly have similarities. Groups is actually a new feature. So our capabilities actually were in development before Groups was released. So it was funny how they came out very interestingly similar, except there's some key differences. I mean, really, we're focused on context, right? So everything's in the context of an email, whereas a group is just a group. A group is like, if you think about it, it's like Yammer. You create your Yammer channel, and then you add a bunch of stuff to it, and it's a thing that's open. Whereas we're focused on the idea of context around collaboration. So I think you'll see very, very quickly that the two worlds will diverge and not look as similar. But because Groups is new and it does kind of conversationally things in group pages, and then we have conversationally things, it's got a similarity to it, but you're going to see them split wide apart and go in different directions in terms of the long-term roadmap for both those products. If we have Collabware CLM, Collab Space separate license, yes, it is a separate license, but if you're already a customer of Collabware CLM, there are additional discounts you would be entitled to. Is the interface customizable by our developers? In terms, I'm not exactly sure what that customization would be that you're thinking of, but in terms of like the Outlook add-in, it is not customizable. If you're thinking in terms of what you saw in SharePoint, then there would certainly be SharePoint customizations that you could apply. What happens when someone is removed from a space, stuff they've said and what they've contributed? It stays in the space. They just aren't in the space. So it's basically once you say something or add a file, it's in the space. If you're no longer in the space, then, well, what you said didn't get unsaid. It's still there. On the SharePoint email side, it seems potentially lose context of emails in relation to the documents. They seem to be treated as discrete pieces of content. It almost seems like we'd want to merge the features, functionality of Spaces and SharePoint Outlook similar to Microsoft Groups. So I guess this is kind of coming to the groups thing again. I'm not entirely sure that I'm fully getting the gist of the loss of context in relation to the documents, because in fact, when you take an email from Outlook and you drag it into SharePoint, I don't believe we saw it here, but there is actually a capability in the product that shows you on the email itself that item is in a location in SharePoint. So you're not really losing context. Now, of course, if you use the move option, it's not even in your Outlook anymore. It's just in SharePoint. So of course, whatever you're doing in SharePoint still has all that context. So I'm not sure that you're maybe there's just a little confusion on that from my side in terms of understanding the question, because I don't believe you're really losing context. Everything's being linked together so that no matter which avenue you're coming from, you're seeing all the other pieces of information. Another question, is it possible to have Outlook integration but not enable Spaces? Great question. We've actually had this come up a few times now, and this is something we're certainly going to be looking into, because we recognize that some customers will not be comfortable with having their users put conversations in the cloud, and we understand that comfort level is not strong with everyone, so we are going to work to support that. When you create a favorite to a library and add a file to the favorite, does that add the file to the library, or does it also put it in the cloud? It just adds it to the library. The SharePoint integration is literally with just SharePoint. Now, if you're using SharePoint Online, then of course it's putting it in the cloud in SharePoint Online. But if you're using SharePoint on-prem, it's just putting it on-prem. The only thing that utilizes the cloud functionality are the spaces and conversations that take place. When will the video be available? That's a great question. I would assume pretty shortly, possibly even today. It all depends on how long it takes to process. And that was the last question. That was a lot of questions. That was fantastic. Great questions. I appreciate all of them. And thank you very much for taking the time to visit us today. And hopefully it was a good use of your time. And we look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.